Hey, my name is Anisha Patel, and I'm obsessed with all things career development. Whether that's navigating your professional journey, gaining clarity, or building the confidence to reach your goals, I'm here to support you in crafting your roadmap to success. I've grown a podcast that has reached thousands of people across the globe. I'm growing an online business, and I'm stepping outside of my 9-to-5 to build a career of my dreams. I've walked the path of transformation myself, and now I'm here to share insights, strategies, and stories to help you carve out a career that you love, or even a podcast you've been dreaming of creating, but you've not taken the leap to start yet. If you want to connect with me in between podcast episodes, I share my personal career insights and behind the scenes stories with my newsletter community, which you can join using the link in the show notes. This is the Pharmacist Diaries podcast. Well, hello there. We are actually live. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Pharmacist Diaries podcast, live on YouTube. I'm Anisha Patel, and this is episode 2 of my non-traditional pharmacy career series. It's a 6-month series where we will explore careers and opportunities that go beyond the traditional pharmacy path. I wanted to let you know that we'll be doing a Q&A at the end of this episode, so if you're watching live, make sure to drop your questions in the chat throughout the conversation so I can ask our wonderful guest, Lauren, to answer those right at the end. But before we dive in, I wanted to give a huge shout out to Jamie Wilkie, the Misfit PharmD, and also the author of the incredible Love My PharmD newsletter. Jamie has been absolutely phenomenal at showcasing non-traditional pharmacy careers, and she's actually featured today's guest, Dr. Lauren Curtis, in one of her recent deep dive episodes, or newsletters, actually, sorry. So thank you, Jamie, for the inspiration and for also helping spread word about tonight's podcast episode. Now, if this is the first time that you're joining me, or you missed episode 1 of this non-traditional career series, you can find the video recording replay right here on my YouTube channel, and the audio is also available to download on your favorite podcast app. I interviewed Adam Quiquaro, who's a clinical development scientist, and we discussed everything from what he does in his current role, how to get a job in this field, how much you get paid in comparison to a traditional pharmacy career. So it's a great episode that you don't want to miss. Now, before we also get started on tonight's episode, if you're enjoying tonight's episode, please make sure that you hit that like button. It really, really helps me to understand what content you enjoy, what topics you like to see more of, and your engagement really truly shapes the direction of this podcast. So please hit the like button if you're enjoying it. Now, let me tell you why I'm so excited about tonight's episode and tonight's conversation. A few months ago, I came across Lauren's story and it absolutely blew my mind. She's a pharmacist who went super stressed out at CVS Pharmacy. And one of the quotes that she wrote about in Jamie's newsletter was, "I still get stressed walking into CVS when I hear the phone ringing." And now she has become a 6-figure product manager in health tech. Now, not only is she now earning double what she made in retail pharmacy, she's working Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. No more weekend shifts, no more missing bedtime routines, no more holiday coverage, and no more being trapped behind a counter while her customers demand answers. And here's the best bit. She started this journey over a decade ago with just one cold email, one email that completely changed the trajectory of her career. So let's welcome Dr. Lauren Curtis on tonight's episode. Lauren, welcome to the podcast. How are you feeling tonight?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I'm really
Oh,
excited.
absolutely. I'm so excited to have you. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time.
Likewise.
So let's dive into it. The first thing I kind of want to get into really is a little bit of a background of who you are, where you've come from. So you started off in retail pharmacy. I know at the time when you were in retail and you had your first child, your kind of perception of your career working long shifts and missing the bedtime routines helped you to understand that, hey, is this really what I'm going to be living with or what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my career? And it helped you to think, okay, what else can I do? What else is out there? Tell us about that journey and tell us about how you got into health tech.
Sure. So that's right. I was pregnant with my first child when I started making this transition. And I think before this, there just wasn't really, before that moment when, I was thinking about what life would look like with my first child, I don't think there was enough of a push or a reason for me to look outside of retail pharmacy. I was comfortable. I liked helping patients. There were a lot of things to really love about the job. Um, but I do think I was looking ahead at what that might look like and realizing that it was okay that the circumstances of my life had changed from when I had first made decisions about my career and picked a career that had me working kind of odd hours, working weekends, working nights, and that it was all right to think, okay, well, there might be something else out there. What would that look like? Um, so as fate would have it, I heard from an old mentor at the time. He posted something on Facebook about a new company, and it was PillPack, which is the first startup that I worked at. And I reached out with that cold email because their mission just really drew me in. And that was sort of the first step that really changed everything for me. I didn't know at the time that it was going to completely open up a whole new set of career opportunities, but I did know that I'd be working in a completely new setting and using my skills potentially in a different way. And that was really exciting.
So, when you reached out and did that cold email and you were thinking about what the role was going to be like, did you do it out of curiosity, not really truly understanding what you were getting yourself into, or did you do some research beforehand?
Uh, I researched the company as much as one might. I checked out their website, I checked out any articles about them. I didn't do what I would recommend to people today, which is reach out to people that work there, ask them what it's like. Um, but the role, even though there wasn't really one posted, they weren't hiring at the time, but the role that I saw myself doing there was still as a pharmacist. So I thought it kind of to myself, like, how different could this really be? It's still delivering care to patients. It still had all of the bones of a retail pharmacy experience. It was just happening over the internet. It was happening across the country, and I'd be interacting with patients via computer or phone as opposed to face to face. I think that was mostly correct based on my my research, but I probably would recommend that someone else do a little bit more than I did. But I just was really willing to take a leap of faith, and all of the people that I trust that I talked to along the way seemed very trustworthy, very excited about the mission as well. So I kind of just went for it.
Nice, I love that. Sometimes you have to be spontaneous. You have to think outside the box and be courageous and do something different. Because at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, you could have either gone back to retail pharmacy or you would have found your next adventure. I
Exactly.
guess when you went into that role, what piqued your interest to continue your career pathway? And what were the things that you absolutely loved about the job that you thought, wow, I didn't know this existed. I love it and I need to do more of it?
Yeah, I think there were two things. One was in the clinical realm, and one was like starting to get that taste of non-clinical work. From a clinical perspective, one thing that I loved about the way that the company was organized, and I think this goes for a lot of newer companies in the space, is just that the work that the clinicians were doing was a bit more segmented. So I wasn't really filling a prescription from end to end anymore. I was specifically helping onboard patients and also answering patient inquiries when they called in. And what I loved about that was that I could spend all of my time helping patients directly instead of doing the fulfillment side. I wasn't checking any prescriptions. I didn't see any pills, to be totally honest with you. I was just doing the part that I really loved at CVS. And so it was like if you had extracted all of that and got rid of the stuff that, like, it's not that I didn't like checking prescriptions. It just wasn't the part that really lit me up. Um, that's what I really liked about the clinical side. And then on the non-clinical side of things, I felt like being at a smaller company was giving me the ability to actually make changes that were impactful to the business. if I saw that something was going on and that I could fix it, I felt empowered to just go ahead and do that really without asking for permission. And then I could see the impact that it was having on patients and my coworkers as well.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. Do you know why? Because when I worked in Abu Dhabi and I took the adventure of moving abroad and spontaneously following love and then finding any job that I could find, fell into emergency services and worked for the national sort of government organization for ambulances. It was quite a large organization. However, I was their first sort of long-term pharmacist, and we kind of changed the law for the country for paramedics to be able to administer drugs when they weren't actually allowed to have access to any in an ambulance when I first got there. I got to build and design my own pharmacy with a budget. I was making decisions on a national scale that impacted patients all over the country on my own because there was no one else to bounce ideas off of, and you were just expected to do it. And I fell into this job without really truly understanding the responsibility I was getting myself into because I was only 3 years qualified. I'd just done my 3 year residency and then boom, went into this leadership position. But what I discovered in this job, which sounds exactly like your story, is that you discovered skill set that you had as well as passions around different skills that you probably didn't have exposure to in CVS because of the way that large organizations work, where you can't just fix problems and you have to go through so many different barriers or ask permission from various, you know, individuals or groups of people who would sign off for whether it's finances or policymakers, whatever it
Right.
is. There were so many barriers for us, but I loved the autonomy. If I said to my medical director that, hey, this is the problem I found, this is my proposed idea for a solution, he would be like, run with it. And I was like, whoa, this is intense, but
It's
this is cool because
the best.
now, yeah, I just get to do what I want, which is just great when it comes to experimentation and building
Mhm.
courage outside of sometimes with pharmacy roles, even with hospital, because I'm traditionally a hospital pharmacist, you follow the rules. There are lots of guidelines and policies and standard operating procedures, and actually pharmacists do really well in those areas. In fact, we thrive in those areas
Yeah.
as well, but we're also really creative and innovative. And when we're let loose, like we're just, unstoppable. And this is where I discovered my love for education and training because I trained paramedics, made an onboarding program for paramedics who got hired from all over the world. But I also fell in love with project management and I
Mhm.
became so good at implementing short projects, like 6 to 9 months on my own, without realizing I even had the skill set to be able to do it. Because in hospital pharmacy, I did sort of like the quality improvement projects, or I got involved with audits. I did a small amount of research within that kind of 3 years that I'd been qualified. But this just changed so many things for the hundreds of people who work there, but also all the patients. So I love that you had that discovery in this job, which is awesome. I love that.
Yeah, it's funny that you asked the question of, did I really know what I was getting myself into? Because I really think that if I had, I'm not sure I would have taken the leap. I think I may have been too scared. If the job
Mm,
description said, you're going to create a patient onboarding program and you're going to do project management, I'd have been like, I don't have those skills. Or how do I prove that I can do this because I have never done that before? So it's funny that like maybe having a sliver of like you don't know what you're getting yourself into is the key. It sounds like it worked out for
it
you.
re- it really is. I mean, that sounds crazy, right? Because we're very accustomed to looking at a job description and we start getting highlighter pens out and looking at all the things that we know we're comfortable with.
Mhm.
And if there are multiple items on that list that we're not comfortable with, we automatically put ourselves in the box of I shouldn't apply.
That's right.
And these jobs have allowed me to be a little bit more courageous because if I can demonstrate the ability to transfer skills or apply previous experience to maybe some of the skill set that they're expecting, or demonstrate my ability to learn and be
Mhm.
enthusiastic, then that goes a really, really long way, because that's exactly what happened when I returned to the UK and applied for a pediatric pharmacist role. I really hadn't got that much pediatric experience, but I 100% sold so many transferable skills. I think it was difficult for them to say no, and they were
Yeah.
willing to help train me rather than expect me to be a really experienced pharmacist in pediatrics. So that was it surprises me when you're on the other end of it, how the employer can, I guess, be sold on everything that you have to say about yourself and what you have to offer a team.
You're absolutely right, and yeah, you have to sell yourself first. You have to believe it in those transferable skills on your own before you can sell them to someone else. But you're right, it's almost like it's hardest to sell ourselves on our own skills. And then once you
Yeah.
really believe that you have them, others are like, "Great, when can you start?"
Yeah, exactly. So when you started your role at PillPack and you, I guess, immersed yourself in this new environment, like what were your next steps in terms of the transition phase? Tell us about that story.
Mhm. I don't think I knew that I was trying to make any sort of transition. I just was following my interests and following the things that I felt like the business needed. Uh, Not only because I thought that that would be appreciated, but also because it genuinely I thought was going to be helping patients, which it did. So win-win. But in doing so, I started realizing that I was really enjoying the project management side of things. So much so that I was really spending a good majority of my time doing those activities and also managing my clinical role. And eventually, I went to my manager and said, I here are the things that I've been doing over the past few months. It seems like the business has thrived. You've been very happy with them. I'm really enjoying this, and I think that the business needs it. Uh, would you ever consider allowing me to do this piece full time? And then we can find somebody else to fill my other role. And I simply just asked for what I wanted. And again, it didn't feel like it was like some big thing. If eventually that role didn't wasn't needed anymore, I could be a pharmacist for PillPack. I could go back and do clinical work. We were growing so quickly. We were hiring pharmacists all the time. But I knew in that moment that that other type of work was what was lighting me up. So that's what that looked like, and it was doing those things I mentioned, right? Like actually solidifying what our onboarding program might look like, solidifying the tone for how we handled customer interactions, creating templates, automating some things in the back end. It started out really small with me just teaching myself some things. And then, when those things started working, that's how you get the confidence, doing those mini experiments and kind of showing yourself you can do them to get that confidence allowed me to expand and expand from there.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And you've given us some insight into what you can do in these roles, but for the audience who are tuning in, some people may not really truly understand what roles are available to pharmacists, or what roles are the best suited for pharmacists working in health tech. Can you just give us a brief overview of what that might look like?
Sure. So I think one thing that all clinicians are really good at is something that you mentioned earlier, like having a really regimented structure around our day and a certain way that things are supposed to work. Um, and so we're really good at clinical operations. We're really good at workflows. We're also really good at knowing when those workflows aren't working. And we all have like our little workarounds that are still within the rules, but work a little bit better. Um, so I think that like an operations type of role is really great for pharmacists, whether that be an operations manager or a clinical operations manager. In that type of role, you may oversee other pharmacists, and you may be just ensuring the success of the day-to-day operations of the business. So that's patient outcomes, some quality measures, productivity measures, and the general workflow of the clinical operation. think that's one side of the business. Uh, the side that I'm working in now is product management. So in product, you are actually, shaping the direction of the product itself with the help of user experience designers as well as engineers. And I'm kind of taking in the needs of the business, taking in the needs of our customers, and sort of melding the two together. Sometimes you get really lucky and they just like magically align. Sometimes you have to like figure out what the right way to put the puzzle pieces is together to make everything align. But then bringing those ideas to the engineers and the designers to bring them to life. I think that's a great opportunity for pharmacists to truly understand what patients need and what clinicians need as well. Perhaps you're building a clinical product for other pharmacists. You know exactly what their pain points are. And for patients too, you know how difficult it is for them to stay on a regimen or um, stay adherent to a particular medication, and you could design products that may help with that. Those are just 2 paths. I could go way
You
deeper.
could go deep. Well, let me just say actually to the audience that you have an incredible newsletter that how often do you publish that newsletter?
Ideally, it's weekly. I've skipped a couple of weeks in the past couple of weeks, but it is weekly on Tuesdays. Summer has just been a little crazy around here.
That's fair enough, but I've put it into the show notes so that people can click on it. And I've been
Perfect.
on it, and even if you want to see all the previous newsletters, they're all
That's right.
available.
That's right.
So that's really useful. And you have a website, which is really valuable. And everyone can Google, "Hey, health tech," because that's easy. And I love that. It's great. And it just rings. It's great. I always find that like Pharmacist Diaries is not as easy to kind of say, but hey, health tech is super easy. Um, so it's really good to kind of share that as a resource for people to check out to learn more about all the different roles. If you were a newly qualified pharmacist or like a new graduate, is health tech relatively easy to get into, or do you feel that having that clinical experience for even 2 to 3 years so that you understand the patient pathway, what their problems are, and what they experience on their end would be more valuable before you make the pivot?
Yeah, I think the latter. It is very competitive, and in these non-clinical roles, what makes it so competitive is that you're also competing against people that don't have the clinical background. So, in my mind, it's it's best to position yourself as having like your secret sauce as a pharmacist is your clinical background and your clinical experience so that you can kind of it's like it's the secret sauce on top of your all of your other transferable skills. It's not to say that you can't do it directly out of school, but how you position your background and your skill set may just change a little bit. And I just genuinely think that even though I'm not working clinically anymore, I still think back to specific moments that I had in my clinical experience every day. Every day I am using that knowledge and those experiences, specific interactions with nurses, specific interactions with patients that sort of guide my decision making and allow me to feel empathy towards different different people that you work with in the ecosystem. So I think it's best to have those couple of years under your belt for sure.
Awesome. And what would be the, I guess the easiest or most valuable role to step into as that first role? Because I love that you were still working as a pharmacist. That was a great pivot and a great decision, whether you knew it or not.
Yeah.
You did say like you knew you would still be working in from a clinical perspective, but then it exposed you to the organization, what they do, the other roles that are available, and then you can obviously transfer into those roles or apply into those roles once you get to know the team, exactly what skill set they need to use, how does it link in with a pharmacist background. Um, what do you think is the easiest pathway to those who would really have no experience to begin with?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think it depends on the person's interests, to be quite honest. There are going to be so many new experiences in working in this type of environment if all of your uh, internships and other work experience that you've had while you were in school were all clinical in nature. It's to go completely non-clinical is a bit of a jolt. So if you can create as many uh, I guess scenarios where you feel comfortable, that's for the best. So whether that means that you start out in a clinical role and that all of the new stuff that is happening is, the startup environment and how technology is a part of this, that's great. You have your foundation in clinical work, and then you're learning some of the other stuff. Um, or say you know that you're really great at, communication, and you find a role where that's going to be the crux of what you do day to day. And so you have this strong foundation in your communication skills, and it's some of the other things that you're, process improvement, project management, some of those things are new to you. I think you can be successful no matter the path, but you need to create little pockets of areas where you're going to feel like you can thrive, because otherwise it's going to feel really overwhelming. There's just too much going on and there's too much newness without that sort of anchor.
Okay, that makes sense. And I love that. It was a great explanation. And talking about day to day, what's your day to day routine like? Tell us about that, because now you work exclusively remotely.
That's right.
And from what I'm aware, it's Monday to Friday, 9 to 5.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And you don't have to work holidays, weekends in the same way that you would have had to do in retail.
that's
You're
right.
available to support as a parent way more probably than working in a retail pharmacy with such long shifts. So that must be a bonus. But on a day-to-day basis, how does your job actually, what does it look like for you?
Yeah. Um, well, I'd say that the life of a product manager has a lot of meetings. It's very meeting heavy. But because we work remotely and we have people all over the country, they're mostly squished together in the middle of the day. So I do have some time in the morning to sort of look over my calendar, figure out what my priorities are for the day, and dive into a couple of things and get some things done before those meetings really start. And what that may look like, as far as priorities go, is I'm I- I'm constantly trying to work ahead of what the engineering team is going to need from me. So they need things documented so they know how to build things. They need to know how our application is going to behave in certain scenarios. And I need to document that. And I need to think through certain scenarios in order to write down those requirements for how things should be working. So it may be that I'm working ahead on some things. It also may be that the day before, the engineering team was working on some things that we had planned or talked about, and they have questions for me, and I need to answer those questions in order to keep them unblocked. It could look like I'm spending some time with my user experience designer to think through a particularly wonky interaction that we need to figure out, something that's really complex, as most workflows are in healthcare. And then once that sort of meeting heavy chunk of time starts, those meetings consist of meeting with the engineering teams to talk through requirements, meeting with potentially internal or external stakeholders for my portion of the product to let them know where we are with things, to answer their questions, sometimes get my questions answered, and then sometimes work together on a solution that we're looking to launch maybe in 6 months time, or given that we're in August, we're starting to think through 2026 planning and what that may look like for the company. And my role as product manager is to think through what we need to be building for my portion of the product for next year and how that's going to positively impact the business.
Okay, that's
Hopefully that's
awesome.
helpful.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm thinking from the point of view of communication and technology, and I'm just curious to be honest. I work for the National Health Service here in the UK, which I work for a hospital. We spend so much time on email,
Mhm.
and we do a lot of Microsoft Teams meetings. And I think we've gotten very used to meeting online now instead of doing more in-person meetings. I do miss more in-person meetings because I
Me
just
too.
enjoy, yeah, I enjoy it. But it's a lot of email and it's a lot of online meetings. But Pharmacist Diaries is totally different because when I have interns working with me, or my husband helps me a lot with my podcast production and all my editing, we would prefer to communicate through apps like Slack, which is similar to WhatsApp if anyone isn't aware, but it's amazing and I love it.
Mhm.
We don't use that much email. I spend more time on apps like Asana, or if anyone knows, like Trello or the Mondays, I think is another one, which is a project
Mhm.
management app where we're organizing the workflow of the podcast. Because at times I would record 16 or 17 episodes across 3 days. And then obviously getting all of those edited and released means a lot of organization as to thumbnails are created or show notes are created, social media posts, emailing the guest to let them know when the episode is going to be released. All of that is like a sub checklist within one episode. And an app like Asana allows us to visually see exactly where we're at, but also without having to email each other and tell each other, hey, I've just finished this, can you do the next bit? Because you just log on to the app and you can visually see everything.
That's right.
Whilst working in a hospital, we don't utilize those resources as much as I wish we could. And so I'm curious to know what technology and using different applications is like where you work.
Yeah, this is an interesting question because I'll speak to how we communicate. A lot of that sounded similar to technologies that you're using, and also because of the nature of the product that I'm currently working on, it is used by clinical facilities, and so we have to think through how we want them to communicate within our platform as well. And there is a chat functionality where they can chat about a patient order. But it's you're right that that's like kind of novel and isn't really the way that we're used to communicating as pharmacists in a clinical setting. Um, so, uh, as for how we communicate as a team, especially remotely, you're right. Email is kind of like last on the list. It's not the first thing that I check every morning when I come into work. I usually check Slack, and the reason for that is I want to see, are there any messages that came in for me from the engineering team from the day before? Does someone need something from me? That's where they would normally ping me. And then also we have, public channels where some higher level discussions are being had around strategies and updates on other things, maybe across the product. It's a really great way for me to feel like I can kind of scan through, see what's happened that's new since I last logged on, and then prioritize my day accordingly. So yes, Slack is huge, and we even use Slack often to have video chats instead of Zoom. They have like a huddles feature where you can do a video call with an inline chat as well, and they allow you to respond to a bunch of things with emojis, which my team finds really fun. So we all love to use our emoji reactions to each other's weekend stories and things like that. And to your point around project management tools, I'm glad that you mentioned so many of them because you'll find in some of these job descriptions that one of them will be listed, right? They want you to have experience with Asana, as an example. And and to your point earlier around the highlighting of what do I know how to do and what do I not know how to do, people may see that and say, well, I don't know how to use Asana. But the point is that they want you to have some familiarity with project management software in general. Um, and so, if you have experience with Trello or if you have experience with Monday, that absolutely translates. And so, similarly, in an engineering organization, a lot of companies use a software called Jira, which is just a bit more technical version of these other softwares that we're talking about. But what's really nice is I can do the same thing. I can log in, I can see exactly where a particular piece of work is. And if someone needs help on it, they can tag me on it. And then, we can kind of track it through the process all the way through to testing and completion. Those are probably the biggest ones for me every day: Slack, Jira, some Zoom, and Notion. We use Notion to do all of our documentation.
Excuse the fact that my video's just died. I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, cool. And a lot of individuals will be asking me exactly how much people get paid in these different roles, what the starting salaries are like, what does career progression look like for you? Is that something that you wouldn't mind sharing?
Sure. My experience is all in USD, so I will share with that being the scale. One thing I will just preface with is um, there's a large range, and I don't want that to scare people in the sense that I think when people see a large range, they can be kind of discouraged by that. They can say, well, I don't have a lot of experience, so it would be at the bottom of the range and it would take forever to work my way up, and I'd be competing against all of these other people. But what I think is very different about the tech space is that there are a lot of roles where you can continue to be promoted in place, sort of like as an individual contributor. And your ability to get promoted is not tied to you beating out someone for a promotion. It's truly just tied to your performance and how much you've hit certain milestones. So what's different is that there are a lot of different levels in some of these roles because promotions can happen just kind of when you're ready for them, as opposed to like when a particular role is opened up. And that is kind of what causes these large ranges to occur in these types of roles. So for product management specifically, you'll often find that some organizations have an intro level product manager role called associate product manager, or APM. Uh, Sometimes those roles will start right at 100 to 115. Sometimes I see in the high 90s USD. Uh, that's pretty typical for an associate product manager entry level role. Uh, at a senior level role, it could go all the way up to 160 to 180 plus. And then once you are in more of a leadership role in product, you're talking 200 to 220 plus. So very large range, but it's very much dependent on um, your performance and your product's performance as well as you go along.
That's awesome, but also quite scary. I think, well, here in the UK, I'll give you an example, is when you work for the National Health Service, all the salaries are banded. So your actual role would be banded. So you start off as like a pharmacy intern or what we call a training pharmacist at band five, and then when you qualify, you go to band six. When you kind of specialize, you would go to band seven. Managerial and super specialist roles become kind of eight, and within eight, it's eight A, B, C, D. The salary that you get within that, you literally start off at the lowest possible kind of salary range, and then each year you get a very tiny increment up. And then if you've been in that role for 5 years or more, you get a small increase. It feels
Mhm,
like a very small increase, but there's no room for negotiation on that. So when you do
mhm,
your end of year kind of performance reviews with your line manager, a lot of the times people feel like it's very much a tick box exercise.
mhm,
However, having worked abroad and had the ability to negotiate on salary, starting in the job and also then negotiating within the role, it was such a daunting and scary experience, but it's also awesome if you can get to that point where you can showcase, okay, these are the 10 objectives that we had in our previous review. I have smashed those. I've done so well on them, and argue with me if I haven't, but I've also done XYZ, and you can showcase a different skill set or additional responsibilities, additional opportunities, maybe projects that you've worked on. And then you can obviously then get to that point where you can negotiate um, your next year's kind of like salary. And I think that's such a valuable skill to learn. And I was listening to Stephen Bartlett's podcast just this week where he interviewed a finance expert. She's an accountant. And she was talking about this as well, is that when you are looking at your finances and actually looking to maybe look for that promotion, these are the kind of tips that she was giving. And it was just interesting that obviously this is coming up in conversation that that exists in these types of roles, which is different to potentially when you're working in retail pharmacy like a CVS. Like you can negotiate in the beginning of your contract, but I don't know if it's easy to then negotiate during like the job.
Yeah, it's a great point. I do think that people in clinical positions have less experience negotiating for all of the reasons that you mentioned. And when I took on my role at CVS, um, it was very much like, okay, they're hiring the next round of new graduates. This is what they're paying in this particular region of the country. And that's what I was told. Like, this is the amount. It is not negotiable. And I was like, okay, great. It's been very interesting to navigate uh, conversations outside of that sort of world. When I've been in this industry for 10 years, and sometimes it still feels new, or I still feel like maybe others got some training in having these conversations that I didn't get. But it really does come down to advocating for yourself and using your resources to find out what your market rate really is. So going to a website like levels.fyi is one of them that kind of compiles a whole bunch of salary information for lots of different companies, and you can look at very specific levels at those companies to see what their pay bands are. Certainly, there's always room for negotiation, but it at least gives you a starting place. And all of this pay can certainly depend on how big the company is, how much they can give you in equity, how much they give out in bonuses every year. There's a lot of factors to consider.
Yeah, but positive things, which is great. And I
Yeah,
love that. It's
yeah.
great. It's awesome. And I love when we talked about some of the benefits. I mean, it's nice to work remotely and reduce travel expenses, travel time. You've got that flexibility to, as a parent, to maybe do the school runs or school pickups if possible. But you also know your working hours. You're not working different shift patterns, weekends, like holidays and things like that, which must be a big shift. I mean, I have also within the last year switched to a role where I'm actually working 9 till 4:30, and that's been a massive shift because I used to do 8 to 4:30, but I had 3 hours of travel time. So I would be
Oh,
leaving the house like 6 a.m. before the children are awake. And by the time I got home, it was like 6:37 when they were younger. They were going to bed at 6 p.m. So I would miss out on both the morning and the evening routine, and then having to do quite a lot of weekend shifts and juggling those, which I enjoyed the days off in the week because if you work a Saturday, Sunday, generally you might get Monday, Tuesday off, which was nice. But at the same time, it just wasn't sustainable to have all these different working patterns. And it was exhausting having to travel so much. But now I'm kind of home at a great time to pick up from daycare, cook dinner, do the bedtime routine, and just enjoy my evening with my family.
yeah, that's really nice. It makes a big difference. Huge difference.
And that's good. Okay,
Yeah.
cool, amazing. And we've covered a lot. I think the last question I have is really where do we find these roles? With the exception of the fact that you've got an awesome job board, And I've had a look at this and it's really cool. And I've linked to that into the show notes as well so people can have a look. Where else would you find opportunities for the types of jobs that people are looking for? And also, what's the best way to kind of make a good application as a pharmacist?
Mhm. Um, so yeah, I think the purpose of my job board um, is not to say, hey, these are the only jobs that are good for clinicians that are out there, but I think my goal was to create a space where people could kind of browse through and see what types of titles we're even talking about here when we say non-clinical roles. And so, it's great. Like, start with my job board, take a look at the titles and job descriptions that start to kind of pique your interest. But then you can go to any place that you feel comfortable searching for jobs. For me, that tends to be LinkedIn. For others, it's Indeed or other sites. I don't think one's necessarily better than the other. I do think that you need to be very specific about what you're looking for, or it can cause severe overwhelm. So, the thing that I like about LinkedIn is that over time, once you have been searching for and setting notifications for the same types of titles over and over, the algorithm is pretty good at surfacing new jobs for you as they come up that fit your criteria. If you're constantly in there typing in 50 different titles, it's going to be confused, and ultimately you're going to be confused at what you're really looking for. So I think the important thing is to narrow down your search based on what you're seeing in these job descriptions and titles that sort of keep popping up over and over. These jobs can be found anywhere, and the key is that they don't say that they're looking for a clinician anywhere in the job description. Some of them do. Some companies have been really great about realizing that the clinical background is gold, and that they may want a pharmacist specifically to have one of these non-clinical jobs. But for the most part, you were looking for any job that anybody could apply to, and your background as a pharmacist just helps because you know things about the pharmacy industry. You know things about how all of these workflows all work together, how pharmacists and nurses work together, how pharmacists help patients. So that's the key. I think people start looking for jobs that like are specifically looking for someone with their degree or credentials, and it may not say that.
Okay, awesome. I love that. Oh, have you got anything else to add that we might have missed tonight? I don't think we have. We've covered a lot,
Yeah, we have.
which
Oh,
is awesome.
you did ask me though, how might you, quick on that, how might you, really like zhuzh up your resume, or your application? I think that what we touched on earlier in identifying your transferable skills is the key thing. You want to speak to all of the things that they're looking for that you have done, maybe just in a different setting or a different way, whether that be communication, project management, all of the things that we've touched on. Those are the skills that you want to emphasize, and it's not always about emphasizing all of your clinical background and prowess.
Yeah, true. I mean, that can be quite hard because we're quite, you know, attuned to just, listing all of the very traditional kind of like pharmacist responsibilities, the things that we've achieved, the skills that we've used. But actually, it's
Yes,
how do you apply those skills into this new space that becomes your best asset, which is hard, but I think
that's right.
giving it a go and creating a completely new resume and also trying to write a new personal statement and looking at applications slightly differently, I think would be really valuable.
Absolutely. Easier said than done, like you said, but that's the way.
Well, you have to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere. You've got to try and see what works. And if you don't get an interview, I'm sure there are opportunities to reach out to that team and maybe through email and say, if I wasn't, um, because I wasn't successful, do you have any tips or any feedback? Here in the UK, we are quite good at providing that feedback through a phone call or through email. in jobs that I've applied for, if I've not been successful, it's usually a phone call, which is really good. When I am on the hiring end, especially in my hospital roles and we're hiring junior staff, I love giving at least sort of 20 to 30 minutes feedback, which I think is really generous and you don't get that very often. But
That's amazing.
I feel like it's just so valuable for that person to truly understand what it was that didn't work and how they can improve too.
Agree. I cannot say that things are the US is not known for having such a great system of giving feedback during the application process. It definitely varies company by company. But you're right, just asking for it is half the battle. Sometimes you won't get it unless you ask.
Yeah, cool. Okay, let's dive into Q&A. So
Sure.
if you are watching us live, start sending some questions in. We have a few to get started, but if you have any more, then make sure to add them to the comments. So let me show you. I can show them on the screen, which is very cool. So Abhishek says, have you done like a PMP course? And actually, I don't know what a PMP course is. And is that something that you need to do for a role like this?
Yeah, so I'm gonna get the P's mixed up, but it's management professional. It's a certification. I do not have that. I do not have any special certifications for any of the roles that I've had. Certainly, I think that I don't necessarily think that anybody's looking for it on a resume. It could always give you that extra edge potentially. But when it comes to any certification for any of these roles, what I really like to tell people is you should do it for you. You should do it so that you can get comfortable with the terminology that is being used, the frameworks that are taught. But what it really comes down to when it comes to being hired is ensuring that people know that you can do the job, that you can do the work, and that you have experience doing it in some way, even if you didn't have that title before. So, like, certifications are fantastic, but it's even better to be able to show proof that you've put that into action. So I
Okay,
would not say
cool.
it's required.
We have another question here. So I think the questions that are coming up, the couple of questions are relatively similar. So as a B Farm student, what do I need to do now in order to make it into the health tech space? I'm passionate about the impact technology brings, but I don't know where to begin. I mean, we've covered some of this in today's episode, but what I would say from this perspective is that if you could give three tips on someone who is currently working either in a traditional role or maybe they're a student thinking about going into health tech, what are the three things that you think would be most valuable to get them started?
Sure. I think the first is like really generic and broad, but it's just to stay open to new opportunities as they present themselves. I was very laser focused on what I thought I wanted to be doing. And I think that because of that, and that was retail pharmacy, because of that, I think that I probably didn't take some opportunities that presented themselves because I didn't think that they were going to be helpful. And I think it's just really important that as opportunities come up, if it seems interesting to you, just follow your interests, follow your passions, even if it may feel a little bit outside of the path that you're on. Um, Number 2 would be to network. I did not understand the value of this, when I was in school, but that could be with peers, mentors, folks that you're coming across on LinkedIn who are thought leaders, whatever that might look like, but start building your network now because it really, really pays dividends even years into the future when you're looking at particular opportunities. And I think the last one would be to to just get really familiar with the space, and I know that it's actually quite overwhelming because there's a lot of companies doing a lot of different things. So I would do this maybe in a couple of different ways. One is pick a couple of companies that you really like and you really like their products, you really like what they're doing, and just keep tabs on them. You know, put them on your list of like dream companies in the future. uh, read press releases that come out about things that they're putting out, understand how their business is making money in healthcare. I think no matter what country you're in and what healthcare system you have, the way that these businesses are making money is a very interesting thing to understand and is a really important thing to understand as you're working more on the business side as opposed to the clinical side of business. And and also doing your research, making sure that if you're able to, some of the companies we're talking about are like um, providing action, like care, but some of them are like some fun things like wearables. Become a customer if you can. Go through their onboarding process, go through their purchasing process, see what that experience is like as a user. And I think that that gives you really interesting perspective when it comes time to, maybe be in an interview setting where they're asking you how you would improve their product.
Oh, I love that tip. That last one is so good. Become a user. That's a great idea.
Yeah,
And
and you don't have to spend money. Like sometimes you can just go through the onboarding flow and then stop, just it tells you a lot about what they care about and what they're putting emphasis on.
also, you can sign up to their online newsletters because a lot of companies have online newsletters. So
Mhm.
you would get weekly information that would be able to guide you on what products they're putting out, what feedback they're getting,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
as the technology improves and they kind of share that information through email. I'm a big fan of the Whoop device.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I'm a big fan of the Whoop. And I love their newsletters, but I also absolutely love the app. And there's a couple of times my husband and I have said, "Oh, I wish they had that," or "I wish they had that." And then boom, a few months later, there it is. But from a user experience is really cool. And we've been really, looking after our health, our sleep, our hydration, HRV. There's so much that you can kind of monitor on there, which I wouldn't have had access to, which is really cool.
yeah, yeah. People love Whoop. I don't have one. Maybe I should become a consumer. There you
There,
go.
there it is. There it is. Let me ask you a question from my perspective, because there aren't any more questions in the chat right now. What's your favorite thing about your current job?
Hmm. Um, I think so. I'll give you one answer about the product itself and one about the team. The product itself is really cool because um, we have a lot of different user types. Some products will only have one user type, whether that be clinicians or patients. Uh, we have them from all sort of different angles. We have patients on the platform. We do have clinicians. We also have suppliers because I work on a durable medical equipment um, product. We also have a payer portion of the product, which is actually what I work on for insurers. And I think that that makes it really interesting. And there's never like a lack of things going on. And building all of those relationships between all of the different user types is a really interesting challenge in healthcare. And the thing I like about the company is specifically, I think they've done a lot to really think through what they want their culture to be like as a company. And what that means is, from a team perspective, every team that's working on their own piece of the product is sort of empowered to work in whatever way works best for them. So whether that, feeds into your meeting schedule or how you're documenting work that's going on, your team can sort of make decisions about how it works best that is separate from how another team might do it. To the point that when your team gets a new team member on, usually there's some sort of conversation that happens with that new person about how they like to work, how they like to best be communicated with. It's just a really thoughtful approach that I haven't really seen elsewhere. And that's one of the things I love about working at smaller companies.
I was just going to say that because now, as an entrepreneur and a business owner myself with Pharmacist Diaries, I have interns who come and work for me. And I truly have to think about my kind of podcast and business values and what it is that I want them to be able to demonstrate or what values that I want to see when they're working with me. Even through interviews, those are things that I'm thinking
Yeah.
about. But when I do the onboarding, once they're hired with me, um, we talk a lot about how they like working, what their day-to-day routine is like, how many hours, because I'm really flexible with like, okay, this is the job that needs to be done. If you can get it done in 2 hours a week or 5 hours a week, it doesn't really matter to me, as long as the job is done within the time frame that's required and it's done at a good standard and what I'm expecting.
Hmm.
But also, I have a little onboarding form that helps me to understand a lot of their skill set, a lot of their passions, what they want to learn, because actually it's not just about what they can give me and Sanjay in terms of the podcast, but what is it that I can give in return to help them to grow? So if they have no
Right.
editing skills, is that something they're interested in, something that I can teach them because it's an intern role? But
Hmm.
also, do they have really good skills with TikTok, as an example? And can they help me to grow my TikTok channel, which is something I'm working on? And I have an intern with me at the moment who's amazing. And he's doing such a good job of supporting me with ideas that would work as TikTok videos and things I really don't know that much about. So I'm letting him take complete control over what that's going to look like. But at the same time, he has to understand the values behind the brand. And
Hmm.
I love this about smaller companies. And it's not something I've ever experienced, but I can see how it's molding now that I'm building something. But it also makes me feel like I'm really ready to actually work for a smaller company instead of working for like a big hospital organization. Oh, I've got one more comment, which is such a great episode. Really connected with Lauren's story and loved hearing about her work world. Thank you both. Oh, thanks, Amber. That was
Yeah.
great. So, yeah, that's it really. I had a wonderful time speaking to you. I'm so
Me
glad that we've had
too.
this episode. My audience is going to love this and they're going to find the information so valuable. And just as a reminder to everybody tuning in, scroll down to the show notes because Lauren's resources are there and also connect with her on LinkedIn. She's got her job board and sign up to her very incredible newsletter. There are thousands of other individuals who sign up to this newsletter, which is an amazing achievement, by the way, to
Thanks.
have a newsletter that is so successful. But it also shows, like you said, it's quite a competitive environment and people are looking and craving for more information. So it's incredible that you're able to provide that. So, yeah, otherwise, have a wonderful afternoon to those tuning in to the episode. And I will be seeing you in a couple of weeks, again on a Sunday, 8 p.m. UK time for our next episode.